In this video, I'm going to get into the Matthew Perry death and all of the coincidences surrounding it. And I'm going to do so because I think it's a really interesting case study regarding how to approach this type of research. If you use the scientific method to research something, whatever it is, you go into it with a completely blank slate. You have no predetermined conclusions. You might have suspicions, but you don't go into it thinking, okay, I know what this was because it has these certain elements going on. You go into it thinking, okay, just give me all the facts. Give me everything that is associated with whatever the subject is, every little detail. I'm going to consider it and see if it fits into any known pattern that exists. As it relates to the deaths of celebrities, we have a lot of patterns along those lines where people immediately want to jump to various conclusions. Oh, I know what that was. It was another ritual sacrifice. Oh, they're saying it's a suicide, but I know that's not true. And this is a very effective disinformation tactic that paid shills use, where they fit every news story and every fact into their predetermined narrative. This is how all cults function in general. For example, you create a cult and you say, everything you see on the news is fake. Nobody died or got hurt in anything that you see come across your screen. That's all fake. That's a cult. You can't arbitrarily say that is what happened without getting into the specific facts of any given thing that you are presented with. And the flip side of that extreme would be the mainstream news, which has its own cult that says, hey, everything we give you is the truth. And all the other stuff that you hear about this on the internet or from your friends, wherever it comes from, that's not the truth. Only what we give you is the truth. And only what we give you are the real facts that we have verified. Yes, when you use the scientific method to research something, and you do it a lot over many years, or you do it a lot in a short amount of time, the length of time is kind of irrelevant. You just do the same inquiry a bunch of different times, and you start to notice patterns. All right, you're going to go into an analysis of something similar, having those patterns in your mind, and that's going to be your inherent bias going into it, where you're going to say, all right, I kind of have a suspicion about what this is. Kind of feel like I already know what the research is going to tell me. But you're not going to artificially force things that don't fit into your narrative just to maintain your narrative. Just to maintain those suspicions that you have from pattern recognition. That's how you mislead people. That's how you promote disinformation, where you're just artificially fitting everything into your narrative, no matter what it actually says. And then it's easy for someone to discredit you when you do that. Because after many different times of doing that kind of research practice, someone's going to be able to look through your stuff and point out inconsistency after inconsistency, reach after reach. Hey, that doesn't make sense. Oh, hey, actually, that's not true. You're going to have all kinds of those things going on. If you're coming at it from a rigid perspective of, oh, I know what this is. And yes, there are some facts that don't fit in with that here, but I'm going to ignore those and only focus on the ones that fit. And then I'm going to spam this narrative with those narrow facts that fit to everyone else and pretend like I know what happened. And hopefully, in your mind, you just realize that that's what the shills on the internet do. It's okay to research something and say, hey, I don't know what this was. I don't have a definitive conclusion here. I'm really not sure what happened. There are facts that kind of lead in one direction, but then there's these other things over here that could lead into another direction. And really, those are the best psychological operations out there. They're the ones that have the most plausible storylines. that you can sell in a variety of different directions, and that's how you get people to be out of alignment with each other, where people are clinging to one side or the other side, and they have a lot of facts to support their side and a lot of evidence to support their side, but so does the other person who's coming at it from a different perspective. So just a little disclaimer at the beginning here to pay attention to that sort of thing when you are letting other people's research into your being, okay? Are they promoting the same thing repeatedly no matter what? And are they doing that right from the start when the news breaks? Oh, another story. I know exactly what this is. Here you go. Solved. 24 hours after it happened, right? If there is a pattern of that, you're most likely being lied to in some way, shape, or form, or misled. And that doesn't always have to be intentional. Yes, the paid shills are doing it intentionally, and most people take their lead from the formula that the paid shills have put out there when they don't know any better. But there are some people that just innocently repeat propaganda that isn't true, and I've done it myself. It's very easy to do that when you don't know any better. This is not to excuse it. We can't excuse someone doing that in perpetuity. This is something you eventually have to transcend and learn from to become a better researcher and just a better conveyor of information. Remembering that it has been the official agenda to mainstream a fake version of conspiracy theory culture over the past 20 years. Since 9/11, really. We've had this underground fake truth movement that has morphed into a mainstream fake truth movement, where it's controlled opposition that the system uses to discredit any kind of truth actually getting out about what they're really doing. At the very least, it puts a lot of noise out there that makes it difficult for people who are new, speaking of them, to decipher everything and figure out what's going on. It's interesting, there's an episode of The X-Files along these lines, the reboot that they did, where Fox Mulder's character is in a park interacting with this kind of Satan-esque character. And he says to Fox Mulder, the new reality is that no one knows the truth because there's too much information and too much disinformation that we've put out there. No one knows what to believe. And I think that is true in a lot of different respects, especially regarding the internet, as it exists today in 2024. There is only one truth, and we know that. We are being lied to about what the truth is, but figuring out the details is very difficult because of all of the propaganda and lies that are out there. So, anyways, this Matthew Perry death situation is one of those good examples of something that's very difficult to decipher. There's evidence that supports all of the different stories that are out there about it. And to start, I'm going to get into the mainstream presentation of what happened by all of the news outlets, which is that Matthew Perry died of a ketamine overdose in his hot tub that eventually led him to lose consciousness and drown. And there's a lot of support for that kind of thing happening to a guy like him who was a known drug addict and who had known health problems. This is a report going over his memoir where Matthew Perry went into a lot of his health problems. He was given a 2% chance to live after his colon ruptured in 2018 due to opioid abuse and spent 5 months in the hospital. His heart stopped beating for 5 minutes at a Switzerland rehab 2 years later. He lost all of his teeth. They say at one point, during the height of his fame when he was on Friends, he was taking up to 55 Vicodin per day. I mean, he was seriously addicted to opioids to the point where it caused his colon to explode in 2018. He was in surgery when that colon incident happened for over 7 hours at the hospital and had nearly 14 different stomach surgeries dealing with that problem. And there's just no way around the fact that when you have something serious like that happen to you and you have that many surgeries on it, your health is going to deteriorate. And you could see that in the latest images of him towards the very end of his life in the last couple of years, where he did not look good and he was not speaking well. He was clearly looking like someone who had been through a lot and had a lot of damage done to his body. Meaning, the idea that someone in this state of health and just general state of being overdosed on ketamine and accidentally drowned in his hot tub is very plausible and makes a lot of sense. Someone who hasn't researched these things in the past and hasn't seen certain patterns play out with these types of situations would just go with what they were told about what happened because it makes a lot of sense. This is a very logical story with a very logical conclusion. But having gone over all that, let's get into the things that aren't so logical, or at the very least, follow an abstract logic that you kind of have to see in a different way. Obviously, as a lot of people with a television know, Matthew Perry played Chandler Bing on Friends. And it just so happens that Chandler Bing's birthday is April 8th, 1968. Now, first of all, this is a completely fictitious birthday. But, speaking of pattern recognition, we have examples in the past, like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, playing the character Thomas Anderson and having a passport that expired on September 11th. And in the context of The Matrix, Thomas Anderson worked at Metacortex, and this was kind of a metaphor for the mind transcending into something else. The old mind, Thomas Anderson, expiring on 9/11, and Neo being born again. As I went into in the prior video on the 2017-2024 Great American Eclipse, there is a significant relationship, symbolically speaking, between Trump, the Moonchild, and 9/11 with those two eclipses as it relates to the future of the United States of America. Donald Trump was an eclipse amplifier as an eclipse baby himself, intentionally put into the political system of the United States of America to destabilize it and prepare it to be transformed into something else in the future, symbolically shown through everything they did during the window in time between 2017 and 2024, when these two eclipses traversed the entire country of the United States of America. And that relationship kind of automatically brings Matthew Perry into that symbolic theme because his character's birthday was April 8th, 1968, in the same way that Keanu Reeves' character, Thomas Anderson, had his passport expire on September 11th, 2001. And obviously, in that connection, it's not just April 8th that's a part of the birthday significance. It's the fact that it was in 1968. Which, as I'm sure all of you know by now, because it's common knowledge, a lot of things relating to 9/11 took place in 1968. Number one, construction begins on the World Trade Center itself and the North Tower. 911 is made the official USA emergency number. 2001: A Space Odyssey is released. And for here, something that a commenter on my videos made me aware of, I had no idea this was a thing, which is pretty crazy. Air France flight 1611, which has a 9/11 in it, obviously, crashes on September 11th, 1968. And some family of the victims of that crash believe it was actually an accidental, quote-unquote, missile strike that took down that plane. It at least brings a ritual sacrifice in the context of 9/11 in 1968, 30 years before the actual event on 9/11 itself. Which just adds a whole new element to the 1968 9/11 stuff. And we go back and look at Chandler Bing's birthday, April 8th, 1968. Wow, okay, this is a lot of resonance with the Great American Eclipse and 9/11. So the question is, Matthew Perry just so happens to die on October 28th, 2023, a few months before the actual April 8th, 2024 eclipse. Let's ask the question then, is his death somehow ritually related to all of this? Could it have been a ritual sacrifice of sorts? Well, moving on, Leave the World Behind had its world premiere at the AFI Fest on October 25th, 2023, and this was 3 days before Matthew Perry's death. And then, as I said, he dies in his hot tub on October 28th, 2023, officially of a ketamine-induced drowning. The 911 call was made at 4:07, and he was pronounced dead at 4:17. I'm not usually one to get into numbers, but yeah, you could say that 1 plus 7 is 8, so this is really 4-8. He was pronounced dead. This is where it gets pretty crazy. I will warn you, as the listener, if you're not familiar with any of this stuff. We're going to go into some wild territory now. One of Matthew Perry's favorite songs was Don't Give Up by Peter Gabriel. It was played at his funeral. The music video is an eclipse. And I actually have that up here because it was so crazy. And this is, let's see, randomly 3:22 into the video, about halfway through. But hopefully you can follow me tracking this down here so I don't have to play the whole 6-minute video. But it starts out with the sun, and then slowly the moon comes across and fully eclipses the sun, and then eventually it moves away. So the song, one of Matthew Perry's favorites, that was played at his funeral, is this music video of an actual eclipse taking place. And as I went into in the Leave the World Behind video, there is that infamous sequence where they show a lunar eclipse with the tattered American flag looking like it's about to be destroyed and turn into dust. And they show an eclipse very similar to the one in this Peter Gabriel video. Remembering that Leave the World Behind had its world premiere 3 days before Matthew Perry actually died. And then Leave the World Behind starred Julia Roberts, and Julia Roberts' birthday is October 28th, 1967. So Matthew Perry died on Julia Roberts' birthday. And obviously, if you've seen Leave the World Behind, you know that Friends is a huge part of the plot. The youngest child spends the entire movie trying to watch the last episode of Friends. And in the context of Matthew Perry's death, it really hints at some disturbing themes about what we all do, how we let media run our lives, how we ignore so much of reality in favor of what is presented to us on screens of various sizes. We leave the world behind. And the director of that film shows you that in the last scene when she presses the button to play the last episode. And that's how it ends. In the context of the plot, America is in the process of being destroyed. The White House is under attack. Bombs have been dropped in New York City. The whole thing is falling apart. And all she wants to do is watch the last episode of Friends. Just a really interesting tie-in, though, that Julia Roberts stars in that movie. Her birthday is October 28th, and Matthew Perry dies on that date, which was 3 days after the world premiere of Leave the World Behind. And then I just have down here that Julia Roberts was also in Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson, which was one of the films that really kind of started the mainstreaming of conspiracy theories. That got the idea into everyone's mind in a very mainstream way. And then Alex Jones kind of took that torch into the 2000s and created what we know as the modern conspiracy theory movement. He did it kind of with David Icke. They're the same thing, just David Icke does it in Europe and Alex Jones does it in the US. When that which is in control of this world currently wants to discredit something that is revealing a little too much truth, it just has one of its people that it controls cover the subject in a way that it can be discredited. Which is very similar to how David Icke discredited both 5G and COVID conspiracies by conflating the two at the time and going on this campaign saying that 5G was causing the sickness and it wasn't an actual virus. Which the mainstream news sources can just take and run with and be like, look at what they're saying on the internet. Look at this medical misinformation. Look how dangerous this is. And then they help get things censored at the same time. I've gone into that in a bunch of videos in the past, so I'm not going to harp on that now. Let's keep going here. Making things more interesting, Matthew Perry used to date Julia Roberts, and she appeared on an episode of Friends titled The One After the Super Bowl. This was the only episode that Julia Roberts was in. And they started dating a year after they filmed this episode, and they dated for like 2 years. So they had a relationship, Matthew Perry and Julia Roberts, boyfriend and girlfriend at one point in time. And then Matthew Perry dies on Julia Roberts' birthday. And Julia Roberts is in an episode of Friends with Chandler Bing, who has all this Eclipse resonance now. And the title is The One After the Super Bowl, so I'm just thinking out loud here. Is this referring to the eclipse after the Super Bowl, right? In an abstract way. Because then it just so happens that on this particular Julia Roberts' birthday, October 28, 2023, there was a partial lunar eclipse. So Matthew Perry died on the day of an eclipse. And then at his funeral, they played that Peter Gabriel song where the music video is an eclipse. And then you put that in the context of Chandler Bing's birthday, April 8th, 1968, and the 9/11 Great American Eclipse resonance. And we're like, whoa, okay, we might have something going on here with Matthew Perry's death and this eclipse that's taking place. Is it a coincidence that he died on October 28th during a lunar eclipse in the same way that is it a coincidence that Donald Trump was born on a lunar eclipse and he's a moon child? In other words, if we explore the possibility that this was a ritual sacrifice of some kind, was it done as a way to amplify the effects of their sorcery that surrounds these two great American eclipses? And just their sorcery in general as they plan everything around the stars in this way. On a level that us mere mortals don't understand because we're never taught it, and we don't have the capacity to understand it because we're not taught how to understand anything along those lines. Now, I know I said that part was going to be where it got crazy, but I actually was not being truthful. This is where it really gets crazy. Okay. Matthew Perry, Instagram, and Batman. Matthew Perry had this obsession with Batman for whatever reason. Going back to the beginning, this could be an innocent thing. He just really liked Batman. Or it could be something a little more sinister that was relating to all the stuff I just went into. The last chapter of his memoir was titled Batman, and he has many quotes about Batman. So I ask the question here, were the Batman-themed Instagram posts made 1 to 2 weeks before he died foreshadowing his quote-unquote last chapter? And just for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm going to get into each one, but I'll show you, this is Matthew Perry's Instagram, and he changed his profile picture around the same time to this black and white sleeping picture, which you could construe as him not being alive anymore if you wanted to, but we won't say that's why he did it. Without any further evidence, it's just another coincidence that transpired around the time of his death. And his Instagram really wasn't very active, and it was mostly pictures like this, and nothing flashy, nothing outrageous or crazy. Pictures of him in t-shirts and sweatshirts, and his dog. The usual celebrity stuff that they're required to push. And there's one Batman down here that kind of gives you an idea that this was something that was going on before he got really into this on his Instagram. Another one here comparing his dance as Chandler to the Joker. Right, ordinary people posing with Barack Obama. If I remember correctly, he paid a bunch of money to have this interaction with him, along with some other celebrities. But still, you don't get to do this if you're not in the club, right? So let's remember who we're talking about here as we go. But you can see, he's not very active. This is over a long period of time. He's posting these random pictures. Kind of averages out to around one per month. And then we get all the way up here, starting with this post about a leaf blower. And then he posts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in the span of 10, 11 days, which is very out of character, right? But I'm just going to show you all of them real quick in case you haven't seen it yet. This is the leaf blower. This is the picture with his dad. This is the video where he's in a theater that's showing the Batman. This is a home theater, obviously, with 3 different TVs. And then a bat signal, a pickleball Batman image. Oh, I actually don't remember what this one was. Oh, this is the Baneberry video. Okay. The pumpkin Batman signal, and then a video of the moon, and then the last one, which is him in his hot tub with headphones on and the moon up here. It's very heavily Batman themed, as you can see, and it's very heavily moon themed. Obviously, the moon and Batman are tied together because the bat signal is kind of an artificial version of the moon, where the light goes into the sky, you look up and you see the bat symbol and it looks like the moon with a bat over it. It's kind of an artificial moon in that way. So those two things are tied together, but we got to remember that he died on a lunar eclipse in the context of all the other eclipse stuff that's going on with him. Meaning that could be part of the reason why all of this Batman symbolism was put up. In addition to other ideas about potential suicides, or potentially he knew he was in some kind of danger and he was trying to warn everyone, hey, here's my bat signal. But we'll get further into that as I read about each picture or video. As I said here, he suddenly posted 9 times in succession from October 11th, 2023 to October 23rd, 2023, ending with a picture from the hot tub that he would die in. So that hot tub picture was October 23rd, and he died 5 days later in the same place. Now, the first post was the leaf blower post on October 11th, 2023, with the comment, why can Elon Musk send a woman to the moon and not be able to invent a silent leaf blower? And for those of you who have followed the whole leave the world behind X Eclipse stuff that I've been getting into, very interesting that his first post in this string of posts references Elon Musk and the moon, right? I mean, just so happens that the first post references Elon Musk, the guy who bought Twitter and turned it into X, which has the square and compass symbol attached to it now, which can also be viewed in the context of the X that this eclipse makes over the United States of America, both of them anyway, 2017 and 2024, and how that X is playing into the future of America and Elon Musk's role in the future of not only America, but the future of humanity itself. He's the one that's trying to put brain chips in people, right? But not only Elon Musk, also the moon in that context and as it relates to eclipses. Maybe there's some relationship to a leaf blower there, but that kind of escaped me. I didn't notice anything that stuck out. So we'll move on to the second one, which is October 15th, 2023, a picture with his father with the comment, "Here is me and my father John both holding a beverage." The painting in the photo says, "I forgot what I forgot." It's just interesting to me. Obviously, the moon has a very special relationship with water. It controls the tides of the oceans, and it has an effect on the water in our bodies, which is why full moons are always said to be a more active time where people do crazier stuff than usual, because the pull of the moon on our water and our bodies is affecting us in the same way that it affects the tides. There's always this relationship between water and the moon, and we'll get into Matthew Perry's relationship to water later, but we can start to see a theme emerging here of Matthew Perry, water, the moon, and then Batman ties into that because, again, the whole artificial moon thing with the bat signal. But they're holding beverages in the picture, which, of course, is water of some type. It's a liquid. The third post then is on October 17, 2023. The Batman video with the comment, "No need to worry, everybody. I've got the streets tonight." Ends with the bat signal in stars that look like the Big Dipper. This is the theater video, and I won't play the whole thing. I'll just bring up the very end where he kind of mysteriously pans through the whole room and then walks up to this corner of his ceiling, and he shows this bat symbol with the stars above it. And I don't know enough about this to figure out what it means. I know that this is the Big Dipper in Ursa Major, but I couldn't figure out what this was. And maybe there's something that you, the listener, will know about all this stuff that will instantly pop out. And if it does, please leave a comment along those lines. But I couldn't find anything major, symbolically speaking, as it relates to eclipses or kind of anything else I'm going over in this video. Maybe this is just random because the whole ceiling was stars. But usually with this type of thing, there is no such thing as random. So I wanted to bring this up in case any of you guys out there would have an idea about what this was meaning symbolically. In any event, that's how the video ends. Then the fourth one is October 19th, 2023. Another Batman signal with the comment, "Sleep well, everybody. I've got the city tonight. Matman." This is how he referred to himself to kind of play on the Batman theme. And so he's literally bringing his name into it, Matman, resonating with all of these concepts. Eclipses, Batman, the bat signal, water. The fifth one on October 21st, 2023, Batman plays pickleball with the comment, "WTF." And the significance of that is on the day of his death, October 28, 2023, he played pickleball earlier in the day before he got into the hot tub. Then the sixth one is October 22nd, 2023. 3 cranberries or baneberries with the comment, "This is what I've had to eat today. I'm Matman." Originally, a lot of people were speculating that these were cranberries when it was first posted, and that related to how the lead singer of the Cranberries drowned. But if you read up on this, most of the articles now say that someone on Twitter figured out that they were baneberries. I don't know if that's true, but we'll go ahead and assume that's been fact corrected, that those were actually baneberries. Which also ties into Batman, because of course Bane is a character in Batman. And was featured in the third Christopher Nolan Batman movie. And they're also highly toxic and poisonous. So 6 days before his death, he posts 3 baneberries that are toxic onto his Instagram feed and says, "This is all I've had to eat today." In other words, is he hinting at he's going to be poisoned in some way, shape, or form? Then the next picture is the pumpkin with the Batman signal carved into it with the comment, "Do you know what I mean?" And this was the time of year where pumpkins get carved, so there's nothing out of the ordinary there. But it does just so happen that he would die 3 days before Halloween, so you have this Batman signal in the pumpkin kind of foreshadowing his death along those lines. Then the 8th one is October 22nd, 2023, a video of the moon with the comment, "Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? I'm Matman." That one is the most interesting to me of the all. This is the penultimate one before the last one, where he would be in the hot tub where he died. And he's saying, "Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you?" after I just showed you these 7 other pictures or videos. As if he was trying to convey something to everyone, asking the question, do you understand what I'm really telling you? And this particular one is an actual video of the moon, which is getting into all that eclipse stuff, right? Because he would die on a lunar eclipse date. And then he has all of that resonance to the April 8th, 2024 eclipse, the so-called Great American Eclipse. And all that resonance to 9/11 and the ritual murder aspect of that event. The ritual destruction aspect of it, as it relates to the country itself now. Being personified through the Gemini man, Donald Trump, the moon child. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out, but how do you figure out what something really is when we don't have the ability to know what they really do behind the scenes? The idea that he would post all of this knowing that he was going to be killed is hard to fathom. It's hard to understand. Why would you do that? Anyway, I get into that a little bit further below. I won't go further now. Let's get to the last one, which is October 23rd, 2023. Picture in the hot tub with headphones on, and moon in the background with the comment, "Oh, so warm water swirling around makes you feel good. I'm Matman." And that was his last post. 5 days later, he dies on the day of a lunar eclipse at 4:17 p.m. on Julia Roberts' birthday, where Leave the World Behind had been released 3 days earlier, which has all of this resonance to everything that Chandler Bing's birthday is associated with. And we have this picture of something going on that is very strange and hard to make sense of. So on that date, October 28, 2023, Matthew Perry sent his maid out on an errand and he died while she was out. He had played pickleball earlier in the day, meaning the question is suicide, accident, murder. Either way, there is a clear message sent through these posts that symbolically line up with what happened the day Perry died. First, you have the bat signals indicating danger and asking for help in the context of the last chapter of Perry's book titled Batman, and the last line being, "What would Batman do?" Especially remembering that this was a lunar eclipse day, and the song played at his funeral featured an eclipse in the music video. So you have all of those moon images on his Instagram in combination with the pumpkin image 3 days before Halloween. And then you have baneberries being a toxic/poison berry that are often untraceable in an autopsy. And his official death explanation is that he overdosed on ketamine. Meaning, was he or someone else trying to tell us, hey, there's going to be an official explanation, but what actually killed me will be untraceable on the autopsy? Or another way to put that would be, we have control of the people doing the autopsies, so they will say whatever we want them to say as a part of this ritual. The last picture is in the hot tub he would later drown in, with moon eclipse resonance as well. You can see it in the background up in the corner. And also, one of the pictures, he's with his Hollywood actor dad, where they are both holding those drinks of water. So I ask the question, is family involved? Because Matthew Perry's mother is Suzanne Morrison, who was press secretary to Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, father of current Canadian PM Justin Trudeau, who is a World Economic Forum young global leader. Perry grew up in Canada and tells a story about, quote-unquote, beating up Justin Trudeau in the 5th grade. This gives you an idea of who Matthew Perry really was, the circles that he was interacting with. Press secretary is a very high-level position. You don't just get that job. That's given out to people who are in the club. Or at the very least to people who have sold their souls along those lines and agreed to be a part of it. You don't just get that job, okay? So Matthew Perry's mother was very high up in the Canadian government and most likely had very close ties to that group. That's his mom, and his dad is a famous Hollywood actor in his own right, or at least well known. He's in a lot. He was a lifetime Hollywood actor. And you sit there and you go, okay, well now Matthew Perry makes sense. Now we understand why he became famous. He had all of the ties that you need to get that job. And along those lines, there's this quote from Matthew Perry where he said in his memoir that he prayed to God to make him famous 3 weeks before his friend's audition. And this is the kind of thing that they put out there after the fact, right? This is what they tell you, so you think that anyone can do it. So you think that anyone has the chance to move to California with $5 in their pocket and become famous, like Matthew Perry did. Maybe if you pray, you'll be able to become famous too. It's like, no, Matthew Perry was connected into the club that we aren't a part of, and that's why he got that gig on Friends at age 25, with little to no experience before that. Okay? So he was born in very favorable circumstances and was most likely groomed for this position. And that's where you get into the trouble of trying to figure out what's going on. I don't know how they do this ritual abuse. I don't know how they construct everything. I don't know why some people seem to be abused and others aren't. Why do some people become Britney Spears while others seem to go through it with no problem at all? There doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason behind who they target along those lines. Meaning, could they convince Matthew Perry to live his whole life knowing that he would die at age 54 in a hot tub on October 28, 2023? I don't know. I have to admit that's a possibility, but it seems insane to me because I would never do that or make some agreement that forced me into that. But could he have been brainwashed as a child to believe that he had to do that? Further, do these people at a certain level, when they make a sacrifice like that, get rewarded with some kind of consciousness transfer into a new body in this world? Or are they transferred into a new body in another life, guaranteed, and they don't have to worry about it, so they willingly make the sacrifice? Or maybe something even darker than that. They just make the sacrifice as a part of the bloodline with none of that going on. I don't know, right? These are things that are beyond my pay grade that I just don't have the answer to. The other option, I suppose, is more mainstream in the sense that he was a terrible drug addict and maybe kind of got targeted with the collective energy of that Friends cast who all became famous and made a ton of money, where something had to be sacrificed for what they achieved and received from that which is in control of this world. And it was put all on Matthew Perry, and he had this horrible addiction and he was targeted to be sacrificed. And they justified it along those lines. Look, he's an addict. Everyone will understand and believe this. And they made that decision at some point in the middle of his life when he was experiencing all of these things. That kind of goes against what you'll find in all of the media he was involved in, meaning his relationship to water and all of this stuff, like his birthday as Chandler Bing in Friends, kind of belies the idea that it wasn't planned much further back in advance, which makes that explanation kind of more difficult. So you have to find a reason to explain how this is possible with him knowing about it. If you assume that he was making those posts on his Instagram knowing what was going to happen, which when you look at all of the facts and lay it out, it's like someone knew. Someone was posting who knew what was going to happen. Was it Matthew Perry? I don't know. Could he have already been dead and someone else was posting that stuff for him? Maybe. Maybe all of that footage was something that had been taken long before that, and someone else just had it ready and then put it all up the week before he died. But that goes against the facts that are reported because his last public appearance was about a week before he died, and he was allegedly with friends the day before and seemed to be in good spirits, as they always seem to be, right? And I suppose you could go with the most mainstream explanation, which would be something along the lines of, well, this was all just random coincidence. All the things that followed him through his life were coincidence as well. And then he just randomly died on this day with all this symbolism and was randomly making all of these posts out of nowhere, kind of having some subconscious understanding that it was coming. And he started putting it out there for that reason. And that's always a big time stretch, knowing what we know based on pattern recognition, but I at least have to acknowledge that it's possible, given his drug abuse problems. Again, very likely that someone like him would overdose, quote unquote, on ketamine. But at the same time, it's very easy to sell some kind of ritual murder-suicide when the person has those kind of problems. That's what they did with Kurt Cobain, right? According to author Ian Halperin, the examiner who did Kurt Cobain's autopsy report, Dr. Nicholas Hartshorn, insinuated that he had an intimate relationship with Courtney Love. So the doctor who did the autopsy on Kurt Cobain was friends with Courtney Love, and they may have hooked up. Hartshorn also admitted in the 1996 interview that he should have been recused from the autopsy and was too presumptuous in his findings of suicide. Meaning, Kurt Cobain is a good example of one of these young celebrities who was possibly murdered, and then they said it was a suicide. They injected him with all the drugs, made it look like he was completely out of it, and then shot himself, and then had the autopsy reports reflect that to get all of the people who organized it off the hook. And if they can do that in Kurt Cobain's situation, which it seems very likely that's what they did, they could conceivably do it in every other situation. And then you add the other difficult part of this here, which is that some of the time, surely, these celebrities have faked their deaths, as they show you in Under the Silver Lake. Once they put it out there in the media like that, you know that it has transpired, or they wouldn't do it like that. But figuring out which one did that is impossible unless we spotted them out somewhere, right? And I would assume they retire to islands that none of us normal people can access when something like that goes down. Or they have plastic surgery and just look like somebody different. So is it possible that Matthew Perry knew about all of this and he faked his death as a part of this symbolic ritual relating to the great American eclipses, Leave the World Behind, 9/11, and the transformation/destruction of America? It's possible. I don't know if it's likely, because again, you have to ask the question, this guy was not in great health. Why wouldn't they just kill him anyway? As opposed to expend all these resources on him faking his death. I guess it just depends how connected into the club he was, right? Whether or not they would actually murder him in that scenario, if that's what it was, or they would give him the privilege of faking his death and becoming something else. Again, assuming he doesn't have any of these other outs where he would voluntarily allow himself to be killed. Hopefully you see what I mean here, how this is very difficult to figure out, knowing what we know with our limitations. There's so many different possibilities. And in a situation like that, you just have to kind of take a step back and say, well, I have to just admit everything is possible, because I can't answer it. So as I was getting into in the beginning with Keanu Reeves, Thomas Anderson, and September 11th, 2001, you have this random relationship between Matthew Perry and Keanu Reeves, where Perry caught blowback for a line in his memoir about Keanu Reeves where he says, "River Phoenix was a beautiful man inside and out, too beautiful for this world, it turned out. It always seems to be the really talented guys who go down. Why is it that the original thinkers like River Phoenix and Heath Ledger die, but Keanu Reeves still walks among us?" As all of you know, Heath Ledger died in January 2008 of an alleged accidental drug overdose. Again, they had the autopsy report where he had a ton of drugs in his system. And then The Dark Knight is released in July of 2008. So he actually died before the release of that movie, which is so interesting, right? In the context of potential ritual murder suicides, symbolically speaking, and the relationship between Batman, Eclipses, and Matthew Perry here. Ledger's last movie was The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. Dr. Parnassus made a bet with the devil, Mr. Nick, in which he won immortality. Many centuries later, on meeting his one true love, Dr. Parnassus made another deal with the devil, trading his immortality for youth, on condition that when his firstborn reached its 16th birthday, he or she would become the property of Mr. Nick. Mr. Nick arrives to collect, but always keen to make a bet, renegotiates the wager. Yet Satan loves to gamble as well, right? Is it any wonder that gambling is becoming more and more of a part of our society as they legalize it and promote all of the websites that you can gamble on? Anyways, Now the winner of Valentina will be determined by whoever seduces the first 5 souls. And this is maybe a potential answer to why certain people are ritually sacrificed and others are not. Maybe it's based on the various deals that were made, right? Matthew Perry tells that story about how he was on his knees praying to God to make him famous. Well, what if he replaced the word God with something else that he was really praying to make him famous? The proverbial deal with the devil, right? I mean, that's possible. And then the devil came to collect eventually. Maybe that's part of it. When you make the deal for fame, some of these people say, hey, I'll take 25 years of fame and fortune, even if it means that I'll die younger than I otherwise would. I'll be immortal in a sense when I'm dying in a tragic fashion as a famous person. They'll always remember me and they'll worship me kind of in that way after the fact, venerate me. Maybe some people actually look at it like that. The whole live fast, die young thing, right? The 27 club. You die at the perfect young age where you haven't grown old and broken down and people see work from you that isn't what it was in your prime and they start to lose their high opinion of you somewhat. And when you die at that young age, you're immortalized as that perfect version of you, quote unquote, right? And you live on forever, right? We still talk about a lot of the people who died I mean, I'm still talking about Heath Ledger right now, right? He died 15 years ago. Maybe that's part of the deals they make. Hey, yeah, I'm going to come to collect from some of you who make this deal, but I can see how some people would be consumed by that. I got into that a little bit in the Only Memories Remain recording, right? How that's how they program the people who are serving the agenda of that which is control here. Like they'll gain some kind of immortality by being remembered amongst us slaves. Like we'll somehow venerate them if their name's on a building or we go look at their statue somewhere. And they convince them they'll give them that kind of immortality if they go along with the agenda. And it's like, that doesn't mean anything. Don't be conned into giving your soul away for that. That's the least important thing possible. Having your name on something in this material world that's going to turn to ash eventually, like we all will someday. True immortality is infusing the world with the love of God in a way that can never be denied again. Who do we talk about more than any of these quote-unquote famous celebrities 2,000 years later, right? We talk about that guy who came here on behalf of God, right? We talk about him. He's the most famous person that ever existed for that reason, right? Dwarfs how famous and venerated any of these fake stars are, right? Right before the traveling troupe finds Ledger's character hanging under a bridge, Dr. Parnassus pulls out the tarot card of the Hanged Man, which depicts, so they say, the ultimate sacrifice in order to attain immortality. Ledger's character is then found by Parnassus' traveling troupe hanging from a bridge, very similar to his last scene in The Dark Knight, as the Joker hanging upside down by one leg from a building. So 2 movies in a row, Heath Ledger is hanging, very literally as the Joker hanging upside down by one leg, as they depicted in the Hangman tarot card. So he's really infused with that sacrifice energy, as they tell it, these occultists. I don't know anything about the tarot along those lines. I have no desire to learn about it, for obvious reasons. But they very clearly put that symbolism into his last 2 films, which is very suspicious in the context of his accidental quote-unquote overdose. This is a journalist asking Terry Gilliam a question about Heath Ledger, and there are the references to death in the film that seem terribly poignant in the light of what happened. Did you re-emphasize any of that after his death? And Terry Gilliam responds, the references to death were all in the original script, which people don't understand. They all thought we had written this stuff after Heath had died, and no, we didn't change any of the words. And that to me is what's so kind of scary and spooky. Why was it so prescient? It seemed to be all about death. It's so much of it. And this is what the directors do, right? They all go out there and pretend like they're not sorcerers doing this stuff on purpose. And they give you these reasons for why, oh, I didn't know what was going on. We wrote this before we even died. And it just so happened that he ended up dying. Who would have guessed? It's just an accident. That's why I say the directors always deflect. Where Terry Gilliam also said, there are forces at work on this film. Don't get me into my mystical mode. But the film made itself, and it was co-directed by Heath Ledger. So let's see if the director is being honest here. When we read the next part, where Tony, the character that Ledger played, is hanging beneath Blackfriars Bridge, which is inspired by the actual 1982 hanging of Roberto Calvi, referred to as God's banker due to his relations with the Vatican. Mr. Calvi's investigation indicates that his father was strangled before his body was weighted and suspended underneath Blackfriars Bridge, probably by people who were in a small boat. The choice of bridge may have been significant. The P2 Masonic Lodge members referred to themselves as Frati Neri, Black Friars. And it just so happens that this is the bridge that Heath Ledger was depicted as hanging from in Dr. Parnassus, and his forehead was marked with all of these symbols that kind of looked like runes, and it really insinuated the idea of ritualistic murder in the mind of the viewer when you're viewing that scene, and you see him hanging with that written on his forehead in blood, it looks like. It just so happens that Heath Ledger is in that scene depicted in that way from that bridge where they murdered Calvi in a very obvious way. And then he just so happens to die in the middle of that filming where the script is all about death and symbolic death and has all this occult stuff in it and all this Satan interaction and deals with the devil being made. And then Heath Ledger dies of an alleged overdose in his bed in New York with a script for a film about Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink that they were thinking about adapting, which is titled Thinking Without Thinking. It's kind of what we do, right? Very symbolic that he was holding that script because we just think we're thinking based on what they tell us. We absorb the information they give us and think that is thinking, but we're not actually thinking about what is being presented to us in the way that I'm going over here. Meaning the odds are that Heath Ledger was ritualistically murdered as a part of whatever sorcery they're doing through these movies as it relates to the general spell that the world is under. I don't know. All that stuff's beyond me as well. I just can see its effects. How they're doing it, I don't know. In terms of the details of it, right? I mean, I know how they're manipulating our minds. I can explain that, but the details of the rituals that they're actually doing and how it all works on a granular level, I have no idea. And so it's interesting then that Matthew Perry mentioned Heath Ledger along with River Phoenix, who has a lot of suspicions surrounding his death as well, and Chris Farley, who most people just assume genuinely overdosed. But again, we can't tell. We don't know. He had a lot of the same stuff going on that Matthew Perry did. If you watch all the documentaries on Chris Farley, it's very evident that he was heavily addicted to drugs and went through various periods of being sober and then falling back into it, sober, falling back into it. But he brings up River Phoenix and Heath Ledger in that context and then got a lot of heat for what he said about Keanu Reeves. Like, why does someone like Keanu Reeves get to survive and these other people don't? But then he says, when he got criticized for mentioning Keanu Reeves there, I pulled his name because I live on the same street. I just chose a random name, my mistake. I apologize. I should have used my own name instead. Very interesting comment here from Matthew Perry. First of all, they just so happen to live on the same street. Thomas Anderson and Chandler Bing live on the same street, and Thomas Anderson's passport expired on September 11, 2001. Chandler Bing's birthday is April 8, 1968. And second, he says, I should have used my own name instead, which you could take two different ways. Like, well, I didn't use my own name because I knew I was going to be one of them eventually. Like, did he know that? It was a part of the plan that he would eventually be sacrificed along these lines? Or was it more simple? I should have used my own name because I'm a better example of one of these idiots that gets to live. It was probably the second one there, but still, you gotta ask all the questions here, cover all bases. Incidentally, there's a lot of deaths surrounding Keanu Reeves and many other super famous people. Going back to the whole sacrifice thing and what they do to get where they are and the deals that they make, Keanu Reeves' girlfriend, Jennifer Syme, had a stillborn baby after 8 months of pregnancy, and then Jennifer died in a car crash on the way home from a party at Marilyn Manson's house, which kind of gives you an idea of who these people are all hanging around with, in spite of how they portray themselves in the public, right? It's all one big club on that level, and they all interact with each other. And then, incidentally, you have the well-known fact that everybody knows about Keanu Reeves and his band being named Dog Star, which really ties in 9/11/2001, Sirius, and the Coptic calendar relating to Egypt, where Sirius, the star, was actually transiting the two towers as they fell that morning in New York. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Sirius the dog star, which was the only dog that died on 9/11. And Sirius the dog met with Bill Clinton on 9/11/2000 for a photo. And 9/11 was New Year's in the Coptic calendar. So 9/11/2001 was kind of the first New Year's of the new millennium. And in that context, you can see why a Sirius-centered ritual, which is also at its highest point on January 1st of every year when we celebrate New Year's Eve. So it has that connection to New Year's, even though they changed it on the calendar we use. But it ties in that idea of a mass ritual via the monolith movie screens, the television, that would initiate people into the new millennium and what they were designing it to be in their minds, what their goal for it was, that which is in control of this world. 9/11, as it relates to America, kicked that off, the actual event, starting the transformation of America, its destruction and rebirth from the ashes into something else, very Phoenix-like, as it relates to all the Eclipse stuff. And then Donald Trump was the personification of that as the Gemini Man, where he is the personification of 9/11 as it relates to the further demolition of the United States of America. And that's what his presidency did. And that's why, in a controlled opposition fashion, he is known as the conspiracy theorist president, because he, in one presidential term, completely discredited any of the truth that had come out since those two towers fell on 9/11 about what was really going on in the world. At least in terms of most of the population who isn't aware of these things and just goes by what they're told from official sources. He broke everything, as Scott Adams said, by design. And Keanu Reeves is channeling that into his star, quote unquote, in Hollywood by naming his band Dog Star and having that relationship to The Matrix and Neo, which is the film that everyone in the truth movement uses to describe the system that we are in. So he plays a central role in it from that perspective. And it's very interesting to me that Keanu Reeves and Matthew Perry have this close relationship where they live on the same street. Matthew Perry brought him up in this context as the lucky one who just gets to go on doing his thing without any repercussions, being the one who has all the people die around him, as opposed to him being the one who dies. And then they both have that relationship to their film projects where you have the 9/11 Passport and Chandler Bing's birthday on April 8th, 1968. And Chandler Bing then channeling all of this water, moon, eclipse, Batman energy, which is infused into everything that he does, which I'm about to get to. Along these lines, remember that the plot of the Nolan Batman films is centered on Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows, a secret society that brings empires down when they grow too decadent and depraved. Now, this is a little tongue-in-cheek, right? We know the reason why these things happen in these empires. It's because they're doing it. And they take the position in the Batman film to portray it in a way where it's this thing that needs to happen because of what we humans did. And it's like, yeah, we're culpable. We go along with it, but we don't have any control over the money supply and the financial system and the way they manipulate us through that process to eventually collapse the empires and pervert us into something that we're not designed to be, or at the very least, give us the easy access to the things that we pervert ourselves through. We have to take some responsibility for it, right? We're doing it to ourselves at the end of the day. But still, the aspect of mind control doesn't exactly make it a fair situation where we're making clear decisions with full information about what we're doing. Based on that connection to the Nolan Batman films and the fact that Heath Ledger was possibly ritually sacrificed during the middle of those Batman films, the three of them, I wonder if there would be some kind of research you could do into that and find connections to what I've been going over in this video so far as it relates to the eclipse and the destruction of America and all of that stuff. But the connection between Batman and Matthew Perry kind of is that continuation of the theme. So we ask the question, was Matthew Perry's death some kind of ritual sacrifice relating to the great American eclipse and destruction transformation of America? In the context of Heath Ledger's possible ritual sacrifice, is that why Matthew Perry was so obsessed with Batman? Was he sacrificed during a partial lunar eclipse on October 28th, 2023 to quote-unquote amplify the sorcery surrounding the April 8th, 2024 eclipse in the same way that Donald Trump, the Moonchild, quote-unquote amplifies eclipse energy and did so through his presidency, as I was getting into? Especially in 2017, during his first year, where you had the Unite the Right rally a week before the August 21st, 2017 eclipse, and then in October of 2017, you have the introduction of the QAnon psyop, which led to the MAGA movement that would come out of Donald Trump's presidency and be used as the controlled opposition caricature that we would point at as the danger of domestic terrorists and why everything needs to change in the country. And obviously that narrative is still playing out, and there will be many more iterations of it going forward, I'm sure, especially given the fact that Civil War, the film, comes out April 12th, 2024, 4 days after the eclipse, and given the larger context of the rest of the country and where everything is at. Now, let's get into Matthew Perry, films, TV, and water. There's this interesting thread woven through all Matthew Perry's stuff where he's constantly making reference to water or being associated with it. I say constantly, it's really only a few places that I looked, but I am pretty sure if you took the time to watch everything he's ever done, you would see this repeated again and again and again. That's just how it goes with these types of things, which gets at the idea of him being associated with water, the moon, and Batman as it relates to this potential ritual sacrifice that was made on October 28, 2023. Again, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just a suicide. It's very possible that he just knowingly was going to commit suicide because of all the troubles he had gone through and his deteriorating health. And he planned it out, posted all those things on Instagram, and then went and did it. Sent his maid out and did it. I mean, that's entirely possible. That's an easy explanation for what happened. But then we have to explain all the other stuff surrounding it, right? Then we have to explain the fact that it was on Julia Roberts' birthday and that connection to Leave the World Behind, the fact that his favorite song had the eclipse, and how that eclipse ties into all the Batman stuff, and then Chandler Bing's birthday, and now all this stuff with him, film, and water. So, first, in the Friends intro, Matthew Perry is seen spitting out water as they all dance in a fountain. This is a picture of that. It's also next to some interesting creature. I don't know what that is. It kind of looks like a dolphin, but I don't know what it is. It's like a dolphin with some kind of winged thing going on. Those of you who are listening to this will possibly know what this is, and you can enlighten us all if you know. I shouldn't have even mentioned it now that I'm thinking of it, but too late now. So here's Matthew Perry spitting out water, laying back, kind of giving you that vision of someone drowning and spitting out the water when they are pulled out and people are trying to revive them. At the very least, it's associating him with water in his mouth in the Friends intro. In an episode of Friends, Chandler states, well, what do you know? I guess I'll be the one who dies first. And of course, he was the first cast member to die. In an episode of Friends, Monica says to Chandler that she doesn't want to say, local women saves drowning moron. She's referring to Chandler. They're taking a picture and he's being silly and she refers to him as a drowning moron. In an episode of Friends, Ross says, I'm going to die alone. And Chandler replies, by drowning. Obviously, Matthew Perry died alone by drowning. In The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror 12, the Halloween special, which ties into the time in which Matthew Perry died, his voice is featured for a line in that episode, after which Marge references murder-suicides, very coincidentally. But as we know, not a lot of coincidences as it relates to The Simpsons, in terms of what transpires in the future after episodes air. Then we get to the real wild stuff, which is 17 again, this 2009 movie that Matthew Perry was in with Zac Efron. Now, the scene that I want to get into starts right here with Leslie Mann's character, who is in the process of divorcing Matthew Perry's character. And she looks at him in this very kind of, I know this might be the last time I see you kind of way, and says, bye, Mike. That's the name of Matthew Perry's character. And then, as he's standing out in the backyard outside, after she says this and closes the door, Matthew Perry's character is hit with a single raindrop, which then turns into a rainstorm. This is the scene. He's hit by a single raindrop right here. It hits him right in the forehead. An interesting place to be hit, especially in the context of that Heath Ledger image from Dr. Parnassus, where he's got it written right on his forehead. And I have that picture right here, where it hits him in the forehead and it kind of starts dripping down his face. Then the next scene is him in a car driving, and the storm is kind of going on outside of the car, and the next word out of his mouth is Jesus, which is just a little thing that Hollywood does where, as I've gone into in a prior recording, they associate the term Jesus Christ with negativity or with bad things happening. So every time that you see a character have something negative happen or something crazy, wild happen that's just shocking and doesn't have anything to do with any kind of positive energy, right? It's this thing where characters say, Jesus Christ. They yell it in the same way that you would yell a swear word. They curse it in the same way that you curse words. So they train you, if you watch a lot of media, to mimic that and use that name similarly. So a door closes on your finger and you yell out Jesus Christ. Or someone bumps your bumper and you yell out Jesus Christ. They have you using it in a way that's associated with negative things as a way to diminish what that name is and means. It's just something that Hollywood has done for a long time. And this is another example of it. He's driving and is having all this negative emotion and energy, and that's the word he chooses to use. Again, I should say, that's the word the script writers gave him to say in the scene. Remember, there's always somebody writing this stuff. Then things start to get a little weird in the way that movies always show you, where they want you to understand that something's going on in the atmosphere, something's changing, and they show you a radio station dial going crazy, or they show you some kind of electronics spazzing out and not working right. And they have you look at the radio dial here, which is tuned to 92.5, and the time is 10:28. Which, of course, is the same day that Matthew Perry died. 10/28, October 28th, 2023. After that, in the context of the plot, he kind of hallucinates and sees this janitor standing on a bridge that he's driving across, and he gets out of his car, goes to try to help him, and ends up standing on the bridge looking for him and falls over into the water, into this portal here that's up on the screen. And then eventually it gives you that time travel imagery where he travels back into his 17-year-old body. And the plot of the film then is he gets to interact with everyone as his 17-year-old self and try to correct everything that was allegedly wrong with his life, which is why it's called 17 again. But since not a lot of things we see in movies are accidents, it's interesting that they chose the age 17. They could have chosen 18 or 16 or 15. Because we have the importance of 17 in the context of the 2017 eclipse, where Donald Trump and 9/11, and especially as it relates to the 17 minutes between the plane strikes on the Twin Towers and the 17 minutes between Twin Pine Mall and Lone Pine Mall and Back to the Future. And Donald Trump was elected on November 9th, 9/11, 2017. And Matthew Perry was pronounced dead at 4:17 on the date 10/28 that was on his radio in 17 again. Let me say that again. Matthew Perry is pronounced dead at 4:17 p.m. on the date 10/28 that was on his radio in 17 again. Also, the April 8th, 2024 eclipse could be viewed as 2017. Again, it's the second one that's coming through to make the X. And there's lots of Twin Tower 88 time travel, 9/11 infusion into 17 again, the film. This is a scene at the end of the movie where you have the very clear Twin Tower imagery behind him in the hallway where he's about to do the time traveling again, or traveling back into his older self. And then when they pan to the other side, you have this very clear 88 door pattern that's going on with the kind of monolith panel up here from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Next, there is Matthew Perry as Chandler Bing in the episode, the one where Chandler takes a bath. And Matthew Perry received his only Emmy nomination of the entire series for this episode. Friends had a lot of seasons and a lot of episodes. And this is the only one that Perry got an Emmy nomination for, the one where he's in a bath and says down here at number 4, I could fall asleep in here. I could drown in here. Drowning. He's actually having some reverence for the idea of drowning based on what the scriptwriters gave him to say, his character. And that's the only one he gets an Emmy for, which really makes you think about ritual sacrifice and the idea of, well, hey, hold on a second. Did they know this? And they were giving him an Emmy almost in a posthumous way, a nomination like, hey, we're going to recognize you for this one episode, knowing what we're going to do to you later in a similar fashion. But also in the same episode, Joey wears a shirt with the FDNY emblem and named Captain Billy Burke, who was an NYC firefighter that died on 9/11. And Chandler, the character, hates Baz, but is later convinced to take them based on what his wife does to prepare them, which is kind of interesting as a writer writing this stuff. It's like, yeah, we'll make the character hate Baz. We'll give him these lines when he comes to like them, and we'll kind of infuse everything that's going to surround his death into this scene. I don't know, or it's all just one big coincidence, but kind of hard to imagine all of this is coincidence at this point, given everything we've gone over. Next, Matthew Perry as Chandler Bing in the episode The One Where Emma Cries. He falls asleep, unconscious, in other words, during an important meeting and accidentally accepts an offer to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this is just a random connection that I wouldn't read too much into, but just because I know about it, I thought of it. I don't know if there's really much to this other than I just want to put it in the video again, because I did a real old video on it at this point, where Tulsa, Oklahoma has a mini World Trade Center replica, and this place outside of it called the Center of the Universe, where all kinds of weird acoustical stuff goes, where you can stand in this one spot and not be able to hear anything around you. It's some kind of sound anomaly that's going on. And it has this miniature World Trade Center and this artificial cloud art installation that really gives you this idea of the hole that eventually got put into the Twin Towers. And this view is even clearer, where they show it to you from this perspective, and you can see the hole being right up where it actually happened from that perspective. So yeah, that's in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in case you didn't know. They built that well before 9/11, by the way. Which is where all of this speculation comes from in the first place, right? We have all this evidence of something like 9/11 being planned in advance, and then you see the similar pattern going on with something like Matthew Perry's death, and you don't know the inner workings of it in the same way we still don't know a lot of what they did on 9/11. There's so many different possibilities still that it could have been in terms of the execution of it and how they actually brought down the towers. And that's what I'm referring to. We don't know the actual execution of how, poor choice of words, sorry, but of how they pull off these types of things. How much does the person being sacrificed actually know? Are they murdered in that sense, or are they willing participants? In like a Midsommar sense. These are things I don't have the answer to. Are there times when maybe someone like Matthew Perry just genuinely doesn't want to be here anymore? He commits suicide. He does it, and they somehow know he's going to do that because they can see through various parts in time. So they infuse his whole life with that. I mean, that's an option, right? If we're dealing with something that can see on a different time scale, and it views us in a different dimension, as it were, and it can go through various points in time and see what happens, then it could infuse film with something that it knows will happen from one of the people that has submitted itself to it and won't deviate from it. That could be part of it too. But most likely, given the patterns that we have here based on all of this evidence, it's probably safe to assume that this was some kind of ritual going on, given everything that we've associated with 10/28, the day he died. Especially the fact that that time was on his radio when his character began to experience all of the things that would lead to the time travel / time dilation, and how time travel and time dilation plays so much into the 9/11 thing with Donald Trump and Back to the Future and Donnie Darko and Operation Warp Speed, and just in general, us going through this period in time, how we're all experiencing time in a different way. Almost everyone admits that if time is going faster for some reason. And that could have a bunch of different explanations too, but I think that plays into the mega ritual that they did and how they're portraying it to us via media. And like everything else, they're giving us this replacement for the real thing, because that which is in control here inverts everything and gives us some version of its truth that is similar but not the truth. It comes in the name of love in that way. And speaking of inversion and coming in the name of love, Friends is actually a good example of this. Now, this is hearsay, of course, but Anthony Bourdain has a tweet that he made before he died, stating, during the commercial breaks for Friends, the entire cast would chant, "Hail Satan, Hail Satan," little known fact, I saw it, the internets. And who knows if this is actually true or not, but I bring it up in the context of Doja Cat, who is another one of these entities that they are promoting as somehow having talent and good music, when nothing could be further from the truth. But she had this promotion for one of her songs or albums, whatever the case was, that was put out around the time of Matthew Perry's death. And she has this Friends parody where obviously it spells out demons here. And she's here sitting on the couch as opposed to the cast that's usually sitting there. And a lot of people went into the fact that there's a dot missing here, and that's symbolic of Matthew Perry or Chandler no longer being there. And I don't know if I buy that, because there are 6 cast members and we can only see 4 dots. They didn't show if there was one over here or not. So as it stands, there's already only 4. And then there's a 5th missing. So I don't think you can infer that it's trying to tell you there will be one of the 6 cast members missing. But still, it is a missing dot, which is interesting in the context of one of them dying. But it's more to the point of what they do symbolically that something like this is put out. Friends is a beloved show by many people. I don't know why. I don't know how you can listen to a laugh track comedy. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me, but many people love that show and think it's great, and it promotes all the things that quote unquote good people care about: friends, family, relationships, love, all that kind of stuff. And people fell in love with the show for that reason, and they revere it and they love the characters, and that's why they're all obscenely rich and had pretty good careers after the fact, especially Jennifer Aniston. But that's what this does. That's what everything is about: inversion. So they give you this presentation of all the things that you identify with, but it's really quote unquote demons behind the scenes that are producing it, right? And they're subtly programming you along the way and misleading you along the way and infusing energy into you along the way that you're unaware of. And that's the game that's being played with all media. But let's get back to this. Going back to the beginning, we have Chandler Bing's birthday, April 8th, 1968, same day as the coming April 8th, 2024 eclipse. And then he died on 10/28, which is shown in a very important sequence of the movie 17 again, as it related to all of the things that I've gone into here, but especially as it relates to water and Matthew Perry's connection to water, where he would later drown in his hot tub on 10/28. And obviously then the connection of water to the moon and the connection to the eclipses, both the partial lunar eclipse on his death date and this total solar eclipse coming on April 8th, 2024. Also remembering that he died on Julia Roberts' birthday, who was in Leave the World Behind, which premiered 3 days before he died and featured Friends in the plot. Julia Roberts was in an episode of Friends with the title The One After the Super Bowl, which of course this eclipse will be the one after the Super Bowl. The total solar eclipse that is so rare it won't be seen for, I can't even remember how long after this, a long time. And then they played Don't Give Up at his funeral, which has a music video featuring an eclipse. Which is just the start of it, of course, because then we get into the Instagram feed and what happened in the 10 days before he actually died here in the hot tub, and what he posted as it related to the moon and Batman and all of these bat signals, and how that tied into what happened to him on the day he died. He played pickleball, as this picture foreshadowed. He ate 3 bane berries, which were toxic, and that foreshadowed the overdose on ketamine, which don't show up on the autopsy, the bane berries, that is. And then the Batman symbolism as it relates to the moon and water. I don't have the answer to what all of this means. I have no idea what actually happened, but we can safely say that there was some kind of ritual going on with Matthew Perry's death. It's just a matter of who knew what, and I can't tell you that. But I can show this obvious ritual, and maybe we can learn something from it as it relates to things that will be planned in the future. But that's it for now.